Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So my name is George Wagner. I'm on the product team here at JumpCloud, and I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules today to listen to this webinar entitled Centralized Full Disk Encryption Management for Distributed Mixed OS World. So based on the number of registrants and the number of attendees I see on here, this is a very important topic, and I'm really excited to be here to discuss it with you. So let's go through what we're going to be talking about today, then we'll dive right in. So first off, I want to kind of set the stage and talk about what the issues are out there that are causing your data to be at risk. We'll talk about solutions, mainly full disk encryption, obviously, what it does, what it doesn't do, and also I'm going to show you some very scary statistics to show you if it's not enabled, what can actually happen. And we'll talk about some of the challenges, specifically enabling full disk encryption in kind of the modern workplace, if you will. So in a distributed environment with both Mac and Windows operating systems. And finally, for the exciting stuff, I'm going to unveil our brand new feature, our full disk encryption policies, which will allow you to centrally enable and manage full disk encryption for your Mac and Windows computers. So with that, one more thing, actually, I wanted to remind you that a couple of housekeeping things. I've muted the lines just to ensure you can all hear me clearly and that no one hears on hold music. So if you do have any questions during this presentation, please reserve them for the questions area within GoToWebinar, and I'll go ahead and get to those at the very end. Great. So first off, let's talk about full disk encryption and how it can help you as far as preventing data breaches on your computers, your endpoints. First, though, let's set the stage. So what's kind of led us to this point? I'd say in one word, it's mobility, right? So if you go back to maybe 2005, when I was an IT manager, Windows desktops ruled the world. Not only the desktops, but also servers, and applications like email and so forth. So, and those were all on-prem, which made it very handy just to be in your office accessing all of your applications. As far as remote workers, they were extremely rare. Not only was it hard to lug a 40-pound CRT monitor to Starbucks, but once you got there, you'd have to have a VPN connection. And if you even had a VPN connection, you'd have to have good enough Wi-Fi. And back then, it just really wasn't cutting it. So when you fast forward today, it's almost unrecognizable, right? So with the deluge of laptops that can function as workstations, as well as cloud app offerings, and fantastic Wi-Fi, it's ubiquitous. Those three things together really allow workers to have more flexibility and work just about anywhere, including, Starbucks, for example, airports, hotels, all of those things. So that's actually increased, many believe have increased productivity. But one other thing that's changed is that Macs have been added to the mix. So where Macs were typically thought of as systems for creative people, people even like myself have adopted Macs for their day-to-day operations. So they're increasingly becoming more and more part of the Windows, added to the Windows mix as well. So that's kind of where we're at today. So we started off being very non-mobile. Now we're very, very, very mobile. Unfortunately, with that's going to come some risk. But if you look at remote workers, as you can see, from just 2005 to 2015, the number of remote workers has actually increased by 115%, right? And that was 3 years ago. It's growing rapidly. And, in fact, I became a remote worker myself in 2010, a bona fide home worker with my laptop. So it's definitely rolling fast. But with that increased freedom and mobility comes increased risk, right? Because laptops are easily lost and stolen. As many of you saw in the invitation, one laptop is stolen every 53 seconds. That's pretty shocking. But if you think about the number of laptops that are sold every year, I believe it's around 617 million. There's a lot out there. There's a lot to be stolen, I suppose. And most of them, as far as them going missing, where it happens, where it occurs, shockingly, number one on the list is offices. So your office is actually one of the places where your laptop's most likely to be pilfered or lost. Public transportation, airports, restaurants, and hotels ran off the list. And to give you a little insight into an embarrassing story, I actually left the laptop in a cab in Las Vegas on my way home after one of those big conferences. I didn't realize it until I got to the TSA and my backpack wasn't there. Luckily, I was able to recover it. So there's public transportation. And as far as airports, one of my best friends is the CEO here in Boulder, and a couple of weeks ago I met with him for lunch, and just the night before he left his laptop on the plane. So there you go. So what happens is, if these don't go missing and get into the wrong hands, maybe someone wants them for social media, but someone else may want them for more nefarious reasons. You can be in a lot of hurt, not only from your reputation, your organization's reputation, but also financially. And as you can see here, theft accounts for 40%, 41% of all your data breaches. So it's a pretty serious thing. And that's where full disk encryption comes in as a solution in protecting your data. Not complete and total protection, but it's protection for your data when your laptops are off, for example, or where when data is at rest. And we'll talk about that in the next slide. The fantastic thing about FDE is that it's a cryptographic data protection mechanism, which means that it encrypts all of the data on your drive. It can be used to encrypt your C drive, your data drives, your USB drives, but for the context of this conversation, we're talking more about your system drives. And it basically encrypts it and turns it into unreadable ciphertext, right? Completely jumbled up, mixed up, and it can't be read without a key. Now, the key is essentially, more than likely, it's either 128 or 256-bit key that's created when the disk drive is encrypted and is used to decrypt the drive whenever you log in. So it's a fantastic way to provide, very granular protection below the file level, because there are different types of encryption. There's full disk, there's file, there's database, and others. And there are some advantages to doing each one of them. But in fact, if you could do a layered approach, that might even be better. And finally here, two of these are right under your nose. Windows and Mac OS actually include their own instantiation of full disk encryption with BitLocker for Windows and FileVault 2 for Mac OS. So they're readily available. And we'll talk about in a little while kind of the challenges behind that, but behind deploying those in larger environments. But as far as setting them up on an individual machine, it's complete cake. So how does it work? Well, after a disk is encrypted, only the trusted users are granted access. So that would be, if it was my laptop, in fact, the one I'm using right now is encrypted. When I use my username and password to log in, I'm granted access. And when that happens, the key, basically there's a key that's created, right, a cipher, that's loaded into memory. And as data is being written down the disk, it's being encrypted. And when it's read, it moves up into memory again, and it's decrypted. It's very simple, it's seamless, it's invisible to the end user, which is fantastic. That's what you want to have. And I would say, though, that the biggest thing you need to remember here is that you need to guard your recovery key very, very securely. So I mentioned the key a second ago, a key. There's a key that's generated. It's kind of your master key, your master volume key, but there's also kind of a file level key or a volume level key that's created that is maybe like 64 bits. That's the key that you're going to want to hold on to, because if you're ever in the position where you've forgotten your password, or the user's not presented at the decryption screen, you want to move a drive to another system. In the case where the TPM is tampered with, the trusted platform module, which is essentially a piece of hardware that sits in the motherboard and it gives you an option to hold your key. If that's tampered with, BIOS has been modified, any of those things happen. Even more, you're going to need your recovery key. And that recovery key is shown to you just after you encrypt the hard drive, and no more after that. So you need to be able to keep track of that, because if not, you're going to have nothing on those disks. So lose the key and data is lost. And what does it protect you from? As I mentioned a few minutes ago, it's not the end-all be-all, because if someone gains physical access to your machine when data's at rest, meaning that the system is off, it's hibernating, it's sleeping, you're covered. Okay, that's what this protects you from. However, what it does not protect from is data in motion. So if you have, let's say, your laptop, you're authenticated, but your laptop, but you're away from your laptop, that's a problem. At that point, that data is accessible, and anyone can get in there and email themselves or throw it onto their Google Drive, all the information on there. So that's why it's great protection for laptops, right? And also, I would say if you have desktops that are at risk from a smash and grab, which is something I dealt with years ago, those might also be a great candidate for this type of encryption as well. And I would also say lock them up when you walk away. We are a security company here, and we preach, in fact, we practice what we preach. Everyone in this building, everyone who works here, if you walk away from your laptop for even a microsecond, you have to lock your laptop. And I've gotten so accustomed to it that I'll be at home and I'll lock it when I get up to grab a cup of coffee and no one's even at the house. So it's good practice to have. So if I haven't scared you yet, here are 7 fantastic reasons for you just to be completely freaked out about not having full disk encryption enabled on your computers, on your systems. We'll just go through them, right? So it says 5 million medical data records compromised from a single stolen laptop. 65% of business managers report passwords or sharing them on a note or sharing passwords. That's just insane. 86% of IT practitioners report someone in their organization had a laptop or lost or stolen, and 56% of those led to data breach. 52% of business managers report leaving their laptop with a stranger when traveling. I know I've been asked to do that as well. I don't feel comfortable about it. 45% of healthcare information breaches occur on stolen laptops, and the last 2 are the scariest ones. So $47,000 is the average total cost to a business from a single laptop loss. Okay, so that includes the loss of the system. That includes time away from working for the person who lost the laptop, and also the time spent by the IT staff bringing it online and having to purchase a new laptop. And the last one, $881,000 is the average HIPAA fine for a single stolen laptop. So when you're looking to be HIPAA compliant or compliant in other areas, full disk encryption is actually a checkbox that can't hurt to have enabled. Okay, as you can see, you're protecting your business, right? Your reputation. So it's definitely good to have enabled, almost mandatory. So at this point, I want to pause for a moment and open up a poll and ask you all a question. So the question is, do you currently enforce full disk encryption on your mobile workstation fleets? So there's 3 answers. Yes, all or some of our systems are protected. Yes, but only a portion of them are protected. And no, but I really need to protect them. So select one of those. I'll give you just a second to select them. And then we'll take a look at the results. Just a few more seconds. And by the way, while this is happening, I want to remind you, if you do have questions, please enter them into the Q&A area, and we'll be answering them as soon as you send them out. Okay, so here are the results. 33% of you say that all of your systems are protected. That's fantastic. 36% say that only a portion of them are protected, and 32 say no, but I really need them to be protected. So hey, it's great. That's about what I expected to see, and I think you'll find through the rest of this presentation that we have some solutions that can definitely fit your need. All right, so let's go back to the presentation here. Great. So now let's take a look at some of the challenges that face organizations that are attempting to enable full disk encryption at scale. You know, it's part of it is the enablement, especially at scale. As I mentioned earlier, these are very easy to set up, kind of in one-off situations. But if you're required to do manual enablement for 20 or more, hundreds, thousands of systems, obviously it'll be impossible. And not only that, but if you have a distributed workforce and some of those users have access on their machine where they can disable full disk encryption, that's a problem, especially if you're not able to determine who has been able to disable it. And finally, poor key management. One of the challenges, the biggest challenges I've heard from not only our customers, but from the research I did prior to this presentation is that poor key management can really impact you, okay? Using Google Sheets and putting all of your keys and saving them up in the cloud may work for, a handful of systems, but at scale, it definitely won't work. And like I said, if you lose one of those, let's say you lose one that belongs to the CEO, you're going to be in trouble, right? So enablement and key management at scale is definitely tough. But beyond that, managing those mixed OS systems. In the very beginning, when I was posing the challenge, which was, hey, we've got a combination now, more Macs than ever before in our environments, managing mixed OS environments and enabling, deploying, and managing key escrow for those is another serious challenge. If you do have Windows Active Directory, you can actually manage your keys with that if you're connected to a domain. But if you're not, if you're just in a work group, you're forced to go and find a third-party solution. And if you want to manage your Mac and Windows together, there are even fewer options out there for you. Okay, so I imagine some of you who are saying that you have partial today, perhaps you're running into this right now, and in fact, some of you are using 100% today across your entire fleet. You might as well. So these are the challenges that are facing IT at scale. So now I'm really excited to talk about kind of what we're doing here at JumpCloud around our full disk encryption policies and demonstrate that for you. But I think it's probably prudent for me to give you, for those who aren't familiar with JumpCloud, an overview of kind of what we are doing around our directory services in the cloud and how they can enable you to connect your users to the applications they need and manage them as well. So, but before I do, let's kind of set up the need, right? So in the very beginning, I talked about data mobility, cloud, Macs being a great enabler of productivity in organizations, which is fantastic, but they also put a little bit of a burden on the IT staff, right? So here you are on this webinar trying to find a solution to a challenge you have because you're giving your users more freedom to work mobilely, you've given them high-powered laptops and access to cloud applications, right? Maybe you have fewer or no applications on-prem. This is a great problem to have. The challenge, though, is managing that with kind of traditional architecture. So now you think about managing multiple users in not only on-prem but also up in the cloud, connecting your users to not only the local applications but applications in the cloud, keeping them secure, keeping track of the fact that they've got all these passwords out there. This is a challenge that JumpCloud was actually designed for. We've been around for about 7 years now. We're based in Boulder, Colorado, and what we offer is what we call directory as a service. So it's the first cloud-based directory service, and the purpose behind it is that we enable you to securely manage and connect your users, your user identities, to any resource anywhere, regardless of location, of protocol, all of that. So it's fantastically flexible to administer. We have a centralized management console, not only for our users, but also multi-tenant if that's a need, and as well as programmatically. So let's take a look at some of the key areas that we provide real value to our customers. At JumpCloud, really the user is kind of at the core, right? And so what we do is we provide a single identity for all of the users in your environment, and a single password to access all of those resources. And so when we talk in in a few seconds, we'll talk about access control, but this is access to every single thing that you have, your users have. From a credential standpoint, we keep you extremely secure. We've got all of the rotation, aging, complexity, those types of features that are built into the system to ensure that your users are as secure as possible, as well as multi-factor authentication. And a great feature that you'll see here in a few minutes is our self-service, which is enabled through our, in this case, the Mac app, which you're going to see, which allows your users to change their passwords. So, as I said, you have a single password for all resources. Your users can actually change their passwords from their desktop, which is basically the gateway to everything. Next is being able to connect to any resource anywhere. So you can think of this as kind of Uber single sign-on, if you will, or true single sign-on, where single sign-on allows you to connect to maybe web apps. JumpCloud allows you to connect to not only those web applications, but also to your computers and laptops, as well as your network resources, VPNs, your WAPs, legacy, more traditional applications that are on-prem, everything. And as I mentioned, all of that, you connect to all of that with a single set of credentials. Additionally, we have a built-in API that integrates with Office 365 and G Suite, which enable you to connect and manage those users and provision those users from the JumpCloud admin console, which you'll see here in just a moment. And then from an administration standpoint, it's key to mention that we are centralized. This is centralized management, whereas you may need multiple management interfaces to manage your current environment. We have a single management interface, so no hardware, no software, because we are cloud-based, but it's centralized. We have a REST API that you can integrate with your existing applications for automation, as well as other onboarding and automation tools such as Command Shell, which enable you to do mass importations, for example, from your existing directory into JumpCloud. And then system management. So I mentioned system access in the last slide. System management is our ability to manage your computers, policies in your computers, for example, so lock them down and ensure that you can enable MFA, for example. You can assign policies to them, configuration policies, security policies, and these policies are really the infrastructure that we built our full disk encryption policies on that I'm going to show you here in just a moment. All right, we've reached that time. So what I want to do right now is I'm going to go through, as I mentioned, a brand new feature we have that we're really excited to talk about. We have many of our existing customers have been asking about it, and it's something that we're really excited. We know it's going to provide much value to our existing and future customers, and those are our full disk encryption policies. So these are policies that can be assigned to systems, both Mac and Windows. So basically, it's centralized protection. You can enable full disk encryption. There are two policies, both a Mac policy and a Windows policy. You can enable, and it allows you to enable it into mixed workload environments, as I mentioned earlier. So that was one of the challenges that I mentioned, is enabling it not only just for Mac, but also for Windows. But not only that, it's not only enabled for existing systems, but if you already have, as I saw, 32% of you, I believe, have some of your systems enabled right now with full disk encryption. if you want to enable full disk encryption across those, or have us manage those systems, we can actually manage your existing systems as well as all the new systems on FDE enabled computers. And not only that, and I think almost most importantly, is we escrow all of your recovery keys in JumpCloud. So let's see how it works before we go into the demonstration. So in this example, I'm showing those two policies, the File Vault 2 and the BitLocker policy. And there are a couple of ways you can assign the policy. In the demo, I'm going to assign it to an actual system, but you can also assign it to groups, right? And groups allow you to simplify kind of a one-to-many, if you will, access to policies. So what I'll do is I assign the policies to a group, and this group can be mixed OS environment. So I can have in that group, I can have a mix of Macs and a mix of Windows. And as soon as I apply that policy, the systems under that are actually enabled. So as you can see here, John, Bill, Mary, all their systems have now been enabled, both Mac and Windows. And then any new system that is added into JumpCloud, that is bound to JumpCloud and added to this group, will also receive this policy immediately. So it happens instantaneously. And then right after that, we securely capture the key with our agent, using our agent that's installed in every one of those systems. And then we transport it using mutual TLS connection between the computer and JumpCloud. And that way we can escrow those recovery keys in the JumpCloud admin console. And what about secure key escrow and recovery? Well, when, let's say, a user loses his key, all you have to do is open up the JumpCloud admin console, and you can view this from the policy. You can go to policy and you can look there, or you can go to the system itself and simply select the recovery key link, and from there, secure connection obviously pulls the recovery key and presents it to you, and you can present that to the user so they can get back in. So basically it's completely covered within the admin console. All right. So this brings us to our demonstration. What I'm going to do is I have provisioned two systems and added them to my environment. One is a Mac, one is a Windows, and I've bound users to them. And I'm going to apply our full disk encryption policies to each system. And we'll look at the status, and then we'll go in from the user standpoint on the Mac and watch what happens when it's encrypted, the behavior. Then we'll move back to the admin console and view the recovery key. So let's get started. All right, so this is the JumpCloud admin console. I'm logged in right now, and you can see I'm actually looking at the two systems that I'm going to work on today, the Adam Cohen /Mac and the Arnie Haugen /Windows system. If I move into the system itself, you can see I do have my user bound. There he is, Adam Cohen. And at this point, I have no policies associated with this, assigned to this system. So what I'm going to do now is go into policies. And under my policies, I have several of them already available. But the ones I'm looking at in particular are the File Vault full disk encryption policy and the BitLocker full disk encryption policy. Let's go ahead and open up File Vault. And if you look here on the status page, you can see that there's some description about the policy behavior, tells you what's going to happen once this policy is enabled. And down below, you also have settings such as you can choose to show the File Vault recovery key to the user when enabled or not. You can also prompt the user, you can tell it not to prompt the user to enable File Vault at logout. And another great feature is that you can set the number of times the user can bypass enabling File Vault. So you give them a little more flexibility. Right now I have this set at 0. If we move over to systems, this is where I'm going to apply this policy. I'll apply it right to the Adam Cohen Mac and save. So that one is done, and then we'll go to BitLocker, full disk encryption, and move over to systems. And there's the Windows machine. I'm going to go ahead and bind that. And at this point, they are both enabled. And next time that the agent on the system looks for work on the JumpCloud admin console, we're going to go ahead and tell it to enable those two policies. In fact, if we go back to the File Vault 2 Disk Encryption policy, and I select Status, do a little refresh here. Those should be on there. So there's also let's see here. Type BitLocker. There we go. So the status is enabled. We go over to, let's see here, I'm going to open up one more thing. There's Adam Cohen. Okay. View. It tells us right now that Adam's policy has been deployed successfully. It gives us a start time. And when we go back here in a moment, I'm going to select systems. And when I go into systems, we'll be able to view the recovery key. But it won't happen until the user enables it. So let's log in. Let's let Adam log into his system. And it takes about every 60 seconds. It'll go back. The agent will ping the JumpCloud tenant to see if there's work for it. So this time I'm going to log out. And here we go. Add this user to File Vault. Enter the password. So I'll go ahead and here we go. Enabling File Vault on your volume. The initial setup will take a few minutes. You can click OK to dismiss this window. It's going to happen. And there's our recovery key. So I mentioned early in the presentation that as soon as you encrypt your volume, or sorry, encrypt your drive, you'll receive the recovery key, which is kind of the do not break in case of emergency key. If everything goes bad, there it is. So you'd probably want to write this down. But the great thing about JumpCloud is that we're going to escrow this. We're going to securely transport it from this laptop to the JumpCloud tenant, and it's available for the admin should they need it. So we move back to the administrative console. We'll see if it picked up the key yet. There it is, Adam Cohen Mac. And there's his recovery key. All right, so at this point, it's securely stored for you if and when you need it. You can see also these are previous systems that I've enabled full disk encryption on in the past, and the keys are available there as well. You can open them up as needed. And BitLocker is also doing its encryption. The difference is because BitLocker requires a TPM module, it takes a few more steps to get through than the BitLocker policy does. That's why I thought for time's sake I would show you the File Vault 2 version. So at this point, so kind of to sum things up, I think we have a very exceptional way to provide not only the management of FDE and enablement for all of your endpoints, your computers, for both Mac and Windows, but that's just a portion of what JumpCloud delivers. As I mentioned, we are an identity. We provide that identity management, that single identity and password for all of your users, and use that single password to access all the resources, regardless of location, whether on-prem or in the cloud, and the ability to actually set it up and manage it very flexibly through a single pane of glass or programmatically. This is an all-inclusive feature system, so I know I didn't mention that early on, but I think it's definitely worth mentioning, is that everything I've talked about today is included. This is an as-a-service system, obviously, so it's all included. Support's included as well, and we definitely encourage you to sign up and give it a test drive. 10 users are free forever, so regardless of what you do, you'll always have those 10 users available to you. And should you choose to use JumpCloud in addition to 10 users, it's just the 10 free users, all you pay for is everything past that. Those remain free forever, like I said. And where you can go to download that, go to jumpcloud.com/signup. Additionally, you'll receive a follow-up email thanking you for joining us today, which I absolutely do thank you. It's exciting to have you all here today. In that email, there'll be a link for you, instructions for you to contact one of our representatives here at JumpCloud for a demonstration, or even to get you started up on your instance of JumpCloud if you choose to give it a spin. And if you do that, we'll send you out a free T-shirt. How about that? So definitely encourage you to reach out. And with that, I will open it up for any questions you have via the Q&A. I'll open those up right now and take a look. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in one of our product managers, Kyle, and Kyle's going to answer some questions more from an engineering standpoint for you.
Yeah, hey everybody, this is Kyle Randolph here. As George mentioned, I'm a product manager here at JumpCloud, and I specialize on the system space, so working with the great engineering teams that brought the File Vault and BitLocker policies out that George has been doing an awesome job talking about today. Now, as I go through the questions, there's a ton of awesome ones that have come in. So I'm going to go ahead and work through a few of the questions that we've had in. If I don't address your question during our Q&A session, stay tuned. We'll also be sending a follow-up email to address your questions individually. So let's go ahead and begin. The first one that I see here is, do these policies work on virtual machines? And that's a really good question. When you look at the File Vault side, this is really just predicated on having macOS High Sierra and above, so 10.13 up. And so, yep, you can absolutely do that on virtual machines, test it out, try it before you buy it, and see how that experience is for both yourself as an admin, as well as the employees that you'll be pushing this out to. On the BitLocker side, George mentioned this piece is that really we're dependent on that trusted platform module, the TPM chip. And more specifically, we're looking for TPM 2.0. There's a few ways that you can virtualize that. We've been going through and doing a bit of testing with it on VMware Fusion 10 and above. And so if you'd like to try it on a non-hardware asset, you can absolutely do so via VMware or another hypervisor that allows you to be able to load that TPM virtually. The next question, I saw a few of these actually coming in, was, a lot of folks have already implemented File Vault or BitLocker against their fleet of systems. So the question is, what happens when you apply these policies against those systems? And I'll split this up and kind of speak to the two different versions, File Vault and BitLocker, just because there's a little bit of variation in behavior, just based on the different OSs. On the File Vault side, when you apply the policy to a system that already has File Vault enabled, what we're going to allow is the rotation of that recovery key. And so once the policy's been applied to a system that already had File Vault enabled, what we'll do is we'll rotate that recovery key for you, and we'll do this transparently and surface that for you as an admin in the admin portal. The other thing that you'll note is that there will be a notification to the employee when that's done, just saying that the recovery key has changed. So in the event that the employee had their recovery key previously, we'll let them know that they should reach out to their admin if they need a recovery key to get into their system. And from your side, you can choose whether or not you want to share that with your respective employees. On the BitLocker side, it's actually a little bit nicer in that we don't need to rotate the recovery key. Just using standard manage BDE commands, we're able to gather that recovery key or numerical password from the system and surface that in the JumpCloud admin portal. So on both sides, when you apply that policy, whether or not we're the ones forcing the enablement of BitLocker and File Vault, or we're coming into a shop where you already have that enabled, we provide you methods to be able to surface that directly in your admin portal. The next question I saw here is, can FDE be applied without needing user interaction? That's a great question. On both sides, just kind of based on how FileVault and BitLocker work, there is a little bit of user interaction required in order to activate. On the FileVault side, they operate based on this chain of trust where individual users have the privilege to be able to decrypt that volume. So when FileVault is enabled on that machine, it does require the user to complete an action similar to what George showed you earlier, in that they need to log out and then authorize the enablement of FileVault. On the BitLocker side, similarly, so the user doesn't necessarily have to do the whole password prompt piece, but they are notified via a notification when the policy's been applied that BitLocker is enabled, and drive encryption will begin once they reboot the system. And so in that case, when BitLocker is applied on the system, the user gets a notification that they need to reboot. And so then on the next reboot, the encryption of that drive will begin. The other question that we saw on the BitLocker side was really surrounding the BitLocker hardware, BitLocker hardware encryption and software encryption. To start, we're going to be debuting with BitLocker hardware encryption, so full drive encryption, and we'll be following up in the near term with the ability to toggle software encryption as well. So stay tuned for that piece. The next one we had come in is there a way to run a report to show all systems that are fully encrypted? Excellent question, because so much of this encryption policies is driven on auditing and compliance. And so yes, absolutely. Following our release of FileVault and BitLocker, actually here in the very near term, you'll be seeing that we're going to add another key for systems, which is the encryption state of that targeted system. And what that'll allow you to do is easily see on an individual system basis whether or not that volume is fully encrypted or is not encrypted. You can leverage our PowerShell module here in the very near term to be able to generate reports or alternate scripting mechanisms. And the other one is, let's just kind of talk a little bit more about timing. I saw a few other questions that came in of, not seeing the policies yet in your consoles respectively. And what we have is we're actually gearing up for our general availability release for FileVault. And that's targeted for really looking at early next week to be generally available. So stay tuned for that. And if you're already a customer of ours, we do have early availability for both FileVault and, as of today, BitLocker. So if you're currently a customer of ours, please reach out to your account rep and we'll get you set up with BitLocker and FileVault respectively. Otherwise, here in the very near term, we'll have our FileVault and BitLocker policies available. And let's see, as we go down this list of questions here, there was one other that came in of, it looks like we have some folks who are currently using, BitLocker with a startup pin to be able to, decrypt that volume where you have a pin instead of like a numerical password or that predication on TPM. And so in the pin case, we don't have that in our initial release, but we do have intent to include additional decryption methods as we continue to expand and add more functionality into our BitLocker policy. And so as I'm going through the questions, I think those are the main ones that I saw a lot of questions surrounding and general interest. And as I mentioned earlier, if you didn't have your question answered in our Q&A session, stand by and we'll be reaching out to you individually to ensure that all of the questions that you have are answered. Otherwise, really want to thank all of you for joining in today and taking part in the webinar. We really enjoy being able to talk, geek out with all of y'all, talk about the security and the cool stuff that we're working on cooking up for you here at JumpCloud. And so with that, I'd like to turn it back over to George, and thank you for joining in.
Thanks, Kyle. Yeah, I exactly what you said. So we're definitely excited about this feature and what it can do for you, and we want to thank you for joining us today, taking time out of your busy schedules. We really appreciate it. We encourage you to reach out if you haven't yet. You can reach us at sales@jumpcloud.com or go to jumpcloud.com/signup. Please expect a follow-up email afterwards as well, as I mentioned, with some instructions if you'd like to get in touch with us. And I'll let you go. Thanks.